Yeah, good man.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Ivan Harrison from the other side of the world at this time, and we're going to be talking recruiter enablement. So, Ivan, give us a quick introduction. Who are you? What do you do? Give us a bit of your background.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be on. Been some amazing other videos and guests that you've had. So tough acts to follow. Yes, down in Melbourne, as we briefly touched on, third most livable city at the moment. So pretty high up on the ranking. So if anyone's keen on moving over, there's a lot of jobs still going, even though it's going into a tougher economy. I didn't fall into recruitment, which is probably one of the more annoying sound bites I hear from people over the years. Obviously, nothing against those that didn't intend to forge a path in recruitment, but it's usually said with sort of a less sort of ambitionless undertone. But anyway, I've been working in recruitment for nearly 20 years. I purposefully went into it wanting to help people. Was hoping that I was good with connecting people and joining the dots. I have completed the holy trinity of recruiting. So working in agency, internal, and the RPO world. I have thought about experiencing the vendor side, so sort of your expertise, Adam, in perhaps at one point, so sort of a quad room, a sort of a quad virot, like a triumvirate, but the four could be a future goal. So that's something maybe down the line. But yeah, look, most of my 20 years in the industry has been in internal roles. But I would say I definitely accelerated my development and understanding of recruitment enablement and sort of talent operations when I was working in the RPO space back in around 2014. Could be somewhat controversial, but generally I would say that the RPO teams tend to be the more mature in terms of processes, technology, content, and delivery. Perhaps less leadership changes, more consistency. Their business model was built on being agile, so they can flex and adapt more easily, and also importantly, more consistency around having documented processes, plans, and training guides in place. So I definitely feel for me it's really helped to sort of shape who I am across sort of the different specialisms of sort of talent acquisition.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I've said it many times that I think RPO is an unstoppable force. I think it's going to continue to grow within our world of recruiting. And I also agree that many of the most sophisticated teams and processes and ways of doing recruitment exist within that area, because when you're representing 100 different enterprise organizations, you can't help but to learn good bits from all of them. And when you're basically building, I mean, the RPO teams are the biggest talent acquisition teams in the world. That's the way I kind of see it. So I don't think it's controversial, but I can see why some people might. Okay, you kind of touched on this, talking about some of your experience in RPO, but what is, to you, I think you've said some of it, but let's say it again. What is recruiter enablement?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? In terms of sort of definitions, when we think about sort of talent acquisition versus resourcing versus sort of recruitment and terms being used interchangeably. For me, there is an overlap between recruitment enablement and talent rec ops, where I believe sort of talent operations rec ops may have predated recruitment enablement. There's definitely crossover though in terms of sort of automating kind of lower value sort of repeatable tasks. But I think for me, recruitment enablement looks a bit more at the content side as well as the process and tech. Many talent functions have adopted an enablement mindset well before a specific enablement role was created. I think when I got into recruitment around 2005, it was a case of aggregating from processes, systems, technology, content aggregating that information, so it was all in one place, much like, as we've mentioned, with an RPO, where it could be evolved and it could be leveraged rather than starting from scratch again. So I think especially at enterprise level, we're seeing more of these type of specialist roles being created, where there's so much more opportunity for talent teams to optimize their processes, tech, content, to enhance hiring results and the user experience.
Yeah.
I would pose the question to talent and business leaders, that they need to ask themselves, what does good look like for a specific person or team leading recruitment enablement,
Yeah.
in terms of the outcomes. So is it in an indefinite role or function, much like employer branding and talent intelligence is starting to become?
Yeah.
Or is it something more finite based on reaching certain objectives, such as reducing a large percentage of your repetitive, sort of lower value tasks?
Yeah.
For me, sort of more holistically, Holland McHugh, which is an awesome name. She made a great point on this very series around what recruitment enablement is. Essentially recruiters spending more time with qualified leads and less time with everyone else.
Yes.
Which I understand. I understand the sort of the meaning behind that, but for me, I'd add that good recruitment enablement goes beyond this, and it actually helps to increase recruiter TA experience, their own experience of what it's like to work in that team, the tools that they've got, how they're engaged, and then also helping ultimately with their output. So adopting an enablement mindset can definitely help with not just hiring results, but also sort of team retention and engagement as well. And done well, I've seen it myself. Obviously it's gonna help to enhance the broader hiring community across the business through talent teams becoming more advisory led than just sort of reactive order takers.
Wow. Yeah. I agree with all of that. And actually, this subject needs a lot more airtime, which is kind of why I'm doing this and this series, and why I'm bringing people like you on, who I know have got good perspectives on it. So let's talk about some tactical things. Like, what are some of the things that you've maybe done, or that you would recommend other people do, as either quick wins or things that have been really impactful for you?
Yeah. Look, at the moment, I'm working at Metro Trains Melbourne, rail business that works with the state government here to help to keep Melbourne moving, in terms of the metropolitan train network. 7,000 employees, 1,500, 2,000 sort of hires a year. Very interesting in terms of different types of roles. My role, even though it's not sort of termed as recruitment enablement, there's a big part of it. It's brand new role. I've been in now for about eight or so months, and it's very much of a hybrid around recruitment marketing, talent sourcing, so inbound, outbound, and really taking the team. I think we've got about 30 TA people at the moment along that journey of what are we doing from scratch each time, where we could actually be building a repository of knowledge. And I found, not just in the current company I'm in, but in all previous roles I've had, whether it's been more specialist or sort of leading TA teams, is that a lot of people have really good ideas in their head, or they might know sort of instinctively or empirically, this is a great channel to go down. This is a great piece of content that will work to engage people, but it's not written down anywhere. It's not mapped out. And that's what we're going back to what we've said about RPOs. I feel that they're stronger in that sense, where there is intel that is collated and shared, and that is constantly reviewed in terms of kind of being agile, what might work yesterday, what won't necessarily work tomorrow. So for me, definitely it's about pulling those resources in and walking through, whether it's generalists or specialists, why it's important in terms of having more efficiencies. There may be resistance depending on the maturity of the team, the size of the team, what other priorities they've got going on in terms of we're trying to fill roles here. We don't have time to write stuff down. We don't have time to pull this data together. But it's really sort of about obviously there's a bit of pain before the gain, but from my point of view, I think just showing people kind of what good can look like, rather than starting with a blank piece of paper, is always good. And I think as well, for anyone in a kind of recruitment enablement role, or where you've got a group of recruiters, where you don't have a specific person that has got more bandwidth to really manage this, it's really striking that balance of not spoon feeding them and doing it for them, but going along, to a sourcing jam session, and showing them what good looks like, so it becomes repeatable and scalable. As I said, giving them an initial framework to actually, for them to visualize. We're usually quite visual, right? Human beings. Give them something tangible that they can sort of see the value with, and then they're more likely to sort of help sort of build it where it almost becomes their own, and they run with it.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. Loads of great pieces of advice and things to think about in there. Anything that's repeatable, think about how do we create repositories. Think about we might need to kind of stop what we're doing and actually write it down so that we can share it with people. A phrase that came into my mind when you were talking about that is the best time to plant an oak tree is 25 years ago.
Yes.
And the second best time to plant an oak tree is today. Just get it done. Just get started. If you're not doing this yet, get started. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join me today. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to look forward to writing up the notes that go along with this video for LinkedIn and YouTube, because there's loads of great things in here. I agree with all of them, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Adam. The final thing I would say is that from a sort of recruitment enablement building perspective, there's definitely a lack of tools out there, technology out there, in terms of companies mainly using SharePoint, obviously with the proliferation of Teams. So I can see, obviously, there's people that will share information sort of locally, on their own devices. So again, I think for me, it's also about sort of pulling together what people already do have, and bringing that into one place. So definitely some scope, I think, for improvement around the type of technology we're using to aggregate that information, and then to constantly evolve it.
Very interesting point. I'm absolutely certain that you and I will talk about that again in the future, maybe on this channel.
Yeah, good man. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.